Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Thank you again for your suggestions with regards to the newest entries. Please keep them coming as proof positive again that I do take suggestions up until pretty much the last video that I produced for each series. This particular suggestion was just made the other day. Never heard of this particular cryptid, and in doing a little research on it, it's definitely one of the more memorable cryptids that are out there. I almost wanted to include it more into my urban legends type video set, because this particular cryptid, it sounds like it's one of those urban legends, the ones that are just passed down from generation to generation. But the difference between this and say the Cryptids and Monsters is that this particular entity, it just seems like it has more attributes associated with a cryptid. Something like the hide behind that I talked about a couple of videos back. That's why I included it more with regards to this series rather than the urban legend one. So this one is a pretty scary one. If the Shelly coat, the one that I just did the other day, is more along the lines of a jerk, this one is definitely an entity that means business. It is evil. It is not something that is good in any manner whatsoever. And if for those of you that have heard of this particular cryptid, you'll know exactly what I'm referring to. So those of you that haven't, like myself, when I did the research on there, you'll realize this is absolutely one entity you do not want to come across, but there are ways around it if you do happen to come across it later on. So if anyone has heard of Tunchi, it is apparently a boogeyman of sorts within Peru, especially with regards to the rainforest. Much like, again, the Shelly coat is a boogeyman of sorts for Scotland, this one is for Peru, except this one is, again, much more evil. This one has pure malice associated with it, especially with regards to what it does to people that happen to come across its way. So El Tunchi, apparently there's just 2 stories tied to it. I didn't see anything else that was more, say, current, that was tied to experiences with this particular cryptid. If anyone has any stories besides these 2, please, share them below. But this particular cryptid, these 2 stories are enough to create a very lasting impact. So again, El Tunchi is more like a boogeyman, and the story goes that apparently it was a man who just happened to walk into a rainforest there in Peru, but he became lost, and he became so lost and so disoriented he never found his way out, and he actually died in the rainforest. Apparently the way he died was such a horrible way that he was at a state of mind that he was pure 100% angry and mad at the way he died. So when that happened and he died, he came back as a spirit, and because at that time of his death he had 100% pure hatred, then this is a spirit that wanders around that forest, essentially very pissed off, very mad, very angry at the fact of what happened to him. And so that's why he has pure malice whenever anyone happens to come across his location on there. I haven't heard, by the way, of El Tunchi, this cryptid, being associated anywhere else outside of Peru. If anyone knows any other locations, share them. Nothing here in the U.S., definitely. But I'm sure there are other Amazonian type forests out there that have their own similar type legends. So if anyone knows any of their regional, let's say, cryptids that match this cryptid and its characteristics, share them below as well. So anyways, so now that his evil spirit roams through the forest, the way he tries to lure people, if he doesn't just come across them himself, he instead tries to find people surrounding him to try to do very bad harm to them. The way he does it is he attracts their attention by doing one simple thing, and that is whistling. That's it, whistling. And it may sound like it's very simple, but when one thinks about it, it's pretty much the most, friendliest way, in an evil type way, the most friendliest way to try to have a contact with somebody near and around him. And because the natural inclination is, if you're walking around anywhere and you hear somebody lightly playing a tune by whistling, it kind of, it draws your attention, and it makes you even want to react in a sort of way where if the whistle is in a particular inviting way, like let's say it's in a pitch or a tone that cuts off and it's a familiar tune, you would want to start to do the other half. Like let's say if somebody did that, shave and a haircut type whistle, you would immediately start either thinking in your mind that you wanted to finish the other half, let's say if it's cut in half, or you would want to whistle it yourself. That's the way apparently that this entity works. It whistles a particular tune, if it is even any kind of musical tune, but it whistles something that catches the person's mind whenever they're wandering into his part of the rainforest. And because the natural inclination is again to just try to see, oh, hey, who's whistling, and maybe even trying to whistle back, trying to get the attention, that's when you're doomed, apparently, because El Tunchi, either he's blind of some, like he does not have the ability to see, or he uses some form of echolocation, because the only way apparently that El Tunchi will find somebody is if someone responds with a whistle. And when that happens, when you whistle the very first time back at him, you're doomed, because then he immediately locates you. And the stories go that whenever he responds back, his whistling gets louder and louder, and it gets to the point where you suddenly start feeling uncomfortable. The whistling gets louder and closer, faster too, and so suddenly you realize, okay, this is not exactly going the way you thought it was going to go. And then the whistling gets even louder and louder at that point, closer and closer, nearer and nearer, that eventually it starts overwhelming you. Imagine like air horns blaring left and right of you. That's how loud apparently El Tunchi's whistle is, and the whole point is that he's trying to disorient you so much with his whistling. It overwhelms you so much that you don't see his attack coming, and then that's it, you're doomed. Because apparently whenever he finds you, he kills you in the quote-unquote most hideous way imaginable. So again, there's two stories associated with El Tunchi that have become very popular. Apparently these happened a while back. I don't know the exact years, but it's enough so that it passed down from generation to generation. And both of them are pretty scary stuff. One story has to do with apparently a young Catholic nun. Her name was Sister Bernadette, and she had just traveled to Peru as part of one of those missionary types, I guess, quests or missionary type visits, where she would try to do charity work and try to either convert people there in the rainforest or just try to do something to assist them. But apparently there were some other nuns there already before her. They knew of El Tunchi. They knew of what he does. They knew of what he can do and how he tries to trap people. She did not. So apparently there was one night where they were just visiting in and around the area. They went to bed at night, but before they did so in their bedroom, they started saying their usual prayers. And then all of a sudden, Sister Bernadette said, hey, what's that whistling sound? Because she heard something. The thing was, the other nuns apparently heard the sound as well, but they paid no attention to it. And so she said, can't you guys, hear it? I'm hearing it. Can't you guys hear it? And again, they did not pay attention to it. In fact, one of them even told her there is no whistling sound, in a nervous type manner, and probably in a more direct type manner, like saying there is no whistling sound, as if trying to convince this sister that what she is hearing is there, but that she should block it on there. And then the Sister Bernadette, she just couldn't get it. She kept saying, you absolutely must hear it. I'm hearing it. Why aren't you hearing it? It sounds like, quote unquote, the sound of a fingernail scratching against a blackboard. And then the other nuns apparently started getting angry for her and said, there's nothing. You're not hearing anything. There's no whistling sound. But she would not let it go. And then finally, at that point, the whistling sound got closer and closer, so close that it was essentially outside of their bedroom. And that's when it stopped. It all of a sudden stopped. And they knew that they were in trouble at that point, because it had gotten so loud and so fearsome. It was right outside. The other nuns were again ignoring it, but they did not. They were ignoring it, but Sister Bernadette did not. And then when once it abruptly ceased, they knew that something was about to happen. They immediately then began, I guess, chanting some kind of prayer out loud. They started making the sign of the cross around them. And when nothing else happened, they just went straight to bed. And then at that point, Sister Bernadette, I guess, was staying in a separate bedroom. The nuns then heard a piercing scream. It was her scream. They heard something that was attacking her so fiercely. They ran across to her bedroom, and then that's when they, quote-unquote, recoiled in horror, because the entire room apparently was covered in blood, and then this sister was found nowhere inside the room. She was found actually later on deep within the rainforest. She was hanging from some kind of tree, but her throat had been either ripped out or torn out, and of course she was dead at that point. But her arms and legs were twisted, broken, at very, very odd angles. In other words, not in the right angles that you and I should see your own arms and elbows bending. And the most horrific thing was that she had a look on her face as if what she was looking at the last moment she died was the most horrible thing she had ever seen in her life. So that's one of the stories, again, associated with an encounter with Tunchi. The other one has to do with a similar experience, but instead of it being with nuns, it had to do with a father-daughter who were, again, in Peru on their own type of mission. Apparently he was a English teacher of sorts, perhaps teaching English as a second language there to some of the locals. And then apparently the story goes that one day, I guess the two of them were inside the teaching room, and then she was looking at the window, the girl was, and she saw a strange dark shadow moving in the distance through the forest. And then that's when that the father noticed her looking at it and asked her, "What are you looking at?" And then she said, "Well, I'm looking at this thing, this dark figure in the trees. It's whistling at me." And he immediately, 100% immediately, stopped what he was doing, grabbed her. I mean, imagine the panic that must have set in, and in turn set the panic in her as well, for him to go from, let's say, a calm mode, just casually asking her, "What are you doing?" to suddenly running towards her, grabbing her, taking her to the nearest room with a closet in there, and then throwing her in there and locking it. Not only did he grab her so quickly and threw her in the closet, he apparently also took something within the key, I guess, associated with the closet, jammed it within the lock itself, and tore the key in a manner that the closet would not open from the outside. It would have to be only open from the inside. This all happened within a fraction of seconds. This young girl was so terrified that she was crying out at the same time, asking, what was wrong? What's happening? What's happening? He was not responding because he knew exactly what was going to happen next. So he quickly, again, after throwing his daughter in the closet and jamming his whatever key it was, breaking it from the lock to keep it closed, he shut everything within the room. He shut the boards, I guess, that made up the windows. He shut the door, also doing the same thing apparently with the key that was there. And then inside the middle of the room started, I guess, praying as loud as he could. He was apparently, I guess this particular entity, it either is harmed by any kind of prayers, or it's the illusion of it that harms it on there. But he was doing something, and the girl said that later on, all she heard within the bedroom, because she saw again her father doing this probably through the keyhole, probably through the bottom of the boards, the little space between the bottom of the door. But anyways, all of a sudden she heard a huge, gigantic crash. Something burst through the bedroom door, even though it was locked, even though the key was again broken within the bedroom door itself, because this, whatever it was, this thing burst through it. She did not see it. All she heard was the sounds of her father, quote unquote, screaming in horror. Then she heard the window, like the boards covering it, and there was probably some glass there apparently, shatter. and that was it. So apparently whatever came in grabbed her father. He screamed in horror several times, and then it jumped out of the bedroom window itself, and then that was it on there. Unlike the nun story, his particular body was never found on there. So anything involving any kind of traces of him were gone completely. But that is the second story associated with El Tunchi. Again, very, very scary stuff with this particular cryptid. The idea, again, that you have something that attracts people, kind of like those fish that are deep within the sea that attract other smaller fish with that beautiful light that it creates at the end of its forehead. There's like an extended tip of sorts that creates a light. It's all to attract something, thinking that it's a beautiful thing, and then that's when it pounces on them. Here we have this entity that apparently, if you run into it and you hear the whistle and you whistle back, then that's it. You're doomed. You are 100% found, and you are doomed on there. So apparently the way to stop El Tunche from attacking you is the minute you hear that whistle, as hard as it is to try to not do it, don't think about it. Don't acknowledge it. Don't even run it through your head. Apparently the way to get around it is to ignore El Tunche. Again, I don't know if this is because maybe El Tunche might be blind, or he uses some kind of ecosystem of some sort, but the idea is the less attention you pay to it, the attacks will not happen then at that point. Don't ever also of any kind have any kind of whistle in response back to El Tunche. As inviting as it may seem, you might hear a lightful tune being played in the far background in the forest. Maybe even like an imitation of, let's say, a bird, or maybe even an imitation of some kind of other cricket or grasshopper. The idea is that's his invitation to try to find you, and the minute you do that and you whistle back any kind of tune, even if it's a musical tune or if it's not, then that's it. He's found. So do not whistle back. Do not do any kind of noise. Just try really to just either turn around and walk away, or just try to ignore it. And maybe, as again laughable as it sounds, like I suggested with the Shelly coat, probably the only way to truly get around something like this is to just keep your headphones on and keep them blaring. So that way El Tunche, no matter how much he or it tries to respond to you, you will have no attention to it because you won't be hearing him on there. So again, pretty freaky stuff. Does anybody know any other tales associated with El Tunche? If anyone knows what exactly El Tunche is too, because the stuff that I was trying to find, it didn't really come up with anything other than, again, a random, like a wandering spirit of some sort. I don't know if it's exactly any kind of paranormal item or if it's more cryptid related, but I'm thinking more it's cryptid related. It's just something that, again, is kind of like the genie's Loki, kind of like the Shelly coat. It's just something that happens to live, an entity of some sort within that forest, but these are the tactics that it uses to try to get its prey, essentially. Again, pretty freaky stuff. Thanks again for the suggestion, and as always, please, keep them coming. So thanks again, everybody. Take care.